You would go ahead and turn your Bibles over to Hebrews, the 7th chapter, of course. We're fully now into Hebrews 7. No longer going to review anything in the 6th chapter. The superior priesthood of Christ is where we are. It started in chapter 4, going down through chapter 8, verse 1. And digging into that, we're down to this: Christ is priest after the order of Melchizedek. And that started in chapter 5, and now we're into chapter 7. Of course, what he's doing overall, the approach in all 13 chapters, is comparing Judaism and Christianity and challenging these readers who came out of Judaism not to go back into Judaism, to consider and weigh all the things that they have in Christ so they're not drawn away by those things and those pressures that they might be under. So here's our basic outline of chapter 7, the Melchizedek's identity. We learn more about him than we did back there in Genesis 14 or in Psalm. Don't only get just a short statement in Psalms. Superiority of Melchizedek's priesthood is verses 4 through 10. And then a change in the priesthood necessitates a change in the law. That actually goes into chapter 8 and verse 13. That'll be some new material, but that again is why we need to cover chapter 7 pretty thoroughly and make sure we have it locked in our minds, because this will bring us into the new material that we want to cover into chapter 7. So when did we first meet Melchizedek? Yeah, with Abraham, right? He comes. Yeah, the battle of the kings and all those things that take place. And so he is a contemporary of Abram. So that's when that all takes place, and we learn some things about that. And then we get additional information. We talked about that last week. So we get this additional information from the writer in Hebrews. In Hebrews, we learned that Melchizedek is a foreshadowing of Christ. I'm trying to use those type of terms so that a little bit easier. Now, Charles had mentioned this, and anytime I hit one of these, I think I need to know what's going on there too. So Melchizedek or Melchizedek? What is it? Yes. Yes is the answer. Well, here's what's going on. It's Melchizedek, the total King James Version. It's in the King James Version where it's at. Is what he was looking at. And the 9 occurrences are all in the book of Hebrews. So that's what you find from that when it's spelled like this with the S. Okay, and sometimes the S and the C like it is here. But you get all 3 versions. Sometimes you get the Z and the K. Sometimes you get the S and the C, or sometimes you just get the S. Well, it really is not a big problem if you think about how we have names and how they cross over into other languages. It's very common the way that this works. So it's of Hebrew origin. Melchizedek, that is Melchizedek, a patriarch, is referring to what we refer to as Melchizedek. That's how we pronounce it. Now, did the Hebrews pronounce it exactly that way? No, you don't know, neither do I. How about the Greeks? You don't know that either, neither do I. We have those who are considered experts in those fields that think they know how it's pronounced, but everyday language doesn't sound different in the South than it does in the North. Yeah, think about our language and culture and all that. So the example I'll give you, it appears to be the differentiation between Hebrew and Greek names. You run into this occasionally. Sometimes it's all totally different. But to me, everything I read on it, my conclusion is this: it's like my name. When I took French, I was never called David. I was called David. Why was I called David in a French class? Because that's how the French called David, right? But they were the only ones I ever had call me David, and it's spelled with an E on the end of it. Well, that's how it would be. If we were translating something that I wrote into French, then my name was attached to it, it would be translated that way, and we'd be asking, well, why the E? Well, just because it's in French. Why this? Probably because in the King James Version they thought that was a better, closer to the original pronunciation in the Hebrew. It's the best I can come up with. Okay? Hope that helps. Hope that helps Charles at least. That was kind of what we were asked anyway. Look at Hebrews 7 verses 1 through 3. We'll jump right in again. For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, I'm in the New King James Version, priest of the Most High God, who met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him, to whom also Abraham gave a tenth part of all, first being translated king of righteousness, then also king of Salem, meaning king of peace, without father, without mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like the Son of God, remains a priest continually. So some things we can get from this right away. We learn some things that we didn't learn in the Old Testament. We learn his name, of course. My king is righteous, king of Salem, king of peace. We had that. We find his compound name, Melech, king, Sedek, righteousness, Salem, Shalom, peace. His position, he's both king and priest, which is very unique, isn't it?
Yes.
How many kings and priests do you know? Both offices, king and priest in the Old Testament. This is it. This is it. The only one we know of is Melchizedek. Okay? How about his work? His work is blessing Abraham. He's blessing Abraham, who is the father of us all. His genealogy is endless. There's no mention of father, no death recorded. The only picture is that of a living priest and king of the Most High God. So we meet him that way, and that's where he is throughout Scripture. And so that's what we know. So let no one judge you in food or drink or regarding a festival or new moon or Sabbaths, which are a shadow of things to come, but the substance is of Christ. That's Colossians 2, verse 16 and 17. So with that, we're going to use shadow and substance. So here's what I gave you last week. We didn't really take time to look at this, but this is found all through the book of Hebrews. We'll just go through the book of Hebrews real quick. In the Old Covenant, what was the blood sacrifice? Animals, right? Were they the body, or were they the substance, or were they the shadow?
They were shadows.
They're all shadow. We understand this concept. We don't like the terms type and antitype, and that's okay. We're going to stay away from that. But we'll use shadow and type, or body. So you got shadow, you got body. Okay? So the shadow is the blood of animals, and the body is what? According to Hebrews 9:11 through 14. It would be his blood. Yeah, so here we had the blood of animals, so now we've got the blood of Christ. Look at that in Hebrews. Hebrews 9, verse 11 beginning. But Christ came as high priest of the good things to come with the greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands, that is, not of this creation. Not with the blood of goats and calves, but with his own blood, he entered the most holy place once for all, having obtained eternal redemption. For if the blood of bulls and goats, the ashes of a heifer sprinkling the unclean, sanctifies for the purifying of the flesh, how much more shall the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without spot to God, cleanse your conscience from dead works to serve the living God. More about that aspect as we go on, but there's a shadow and a substance. Look over at Hebrews, the 10th chapter, when this argument is made in some detail, and you look down at verse 4, it says, it is not possible that the blood of bulls and goats could take away sins. Now that does play right into the argument he's making in Hebrews, the 7th chapter. There are limits to these shadows. Are these shadows designed by God to eternally take care of sin? No. No, and if you think about it, none of them are. But they're there in the wisdom of God. They're designed to point to something. What are they pointing to? Jesus. What is the body? What is the substance? Yeah, the blood of Christ, his sacrifice, him as high priest. All those things come into it. So you have those countless sacrifices, and then in the book of Hebrews you read about one sacrifice.
Sufficient.
Right? And it's sufficient, once for all. Okay? And then could not make perfect, that's down in chapter 10. If you're still there, look down at verse 11. And every priest stands ministering daily and offering repeatedly the same sacrifices, which can never take away sins. Well, I understand the context, and we're in the context. It cannot take away sin. It's a shadow. So we need something that can take away sin. Go down to verse 14. For by one offering he has perfected forever those who are being sanctified. How about those in the Old Testament? Yep. How about those in the New? How about those tomorrow, if tomorrow comes, and the next day, and if we stand on this earth for another 1,000 years? Yes. 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 Okay. So those shadows are not sufficient. All right? We could have, just from the book of Hebrews, we could have kept piling those on, you understand? All right? So, Melchizedek is a type for Messiah king. So over there in Hebrews 9, working our way back to Hebrews 7. Hebrews 9, look at what we have in verse 23 and 24. Therefore it was necessary that the copies of the things in the heavens should be purified with these, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. So we've got copies of the things in heaven. Right? What's he talking about here in Hebrews, the 9th chapter? Yeah, he's talking about the copies of things in the heavens, specifically
Christ's sacrifice.
Yeah, he's talking about the temple. That's it, the tabernacle, the temple. So he's going to use that illustration. And I'm just building here to show you where, here's another shadow. They're purified with it, but the heavenly, so, blood was used to purify those things, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. So, for Christ has not entered the holy places made with hands, which are copies of the true, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. So that gives us another way of looking at this. You've got Old Testament copies, shadows, representations of other things. All right? That's the way to think about those. And then you've got the true. So you've got those copies of heavenly things. Isn't that what he was talking about? That were purified with the blood of animals. Remember what Moses did? He took water and he took a hyssop branch and he, on all the people and all the tabernacle and all the everything.
Everything that was used.
Everything that was used. So that everything is sanctified by blood. But what kind of blood was that? Animal blood. Well, that's for the copies. That worked for the copies, is the argument he's making. Doesn't work for heavenly things. You're not going to carry animal blood up into heaven and satisfy God. It's not going to work. All right? The Jews need to hear it. You can imagine how that would ring in their ears. Because they would know those things, right? They wouldn't have to review it like we are. They'd have it. So go to Hebrews 10, verse 1. For the law, look at that, having a shadow of the good things to come. So was the law a shadow?
Yes.
Yes, it was. You see that? And not the very image of the things. We don't normally think about the Old Testament law that way, but that's what it was. But notice, not the very image of the things, can never with these same sacrifices which they offer continually year by year make those who approach perfect. He's not saying the law is incomplete or the law is not perfect in some way. It did exactly and accomplished exactly what God intended. But the blood that was commanded under that law, the blood of animals, bulls and goats, we use that, in that instance, is not going to carry over to the truth. All right? It's just a shadow of good things to come. So do you want the shadow or do you want the good things to come? You see, there's a choice.
I want the true.
You want the true, you want the good things to come. Of course we do, that's what we've chosen. But now if we were Jews coming out of Judaism, dealing with that choice, you see, it's laid out over and over and over again. And I'm just looking at a few of them. So a shadow of good things to come, but not the very image. Again, think how that relates to Colossians 2 verse 17. A shadow of things to come, that's the Old Testament. It's a symbol appointed by God to foreshadow something higher and greater. That would be the substance or the body. Okay? In the future, so that something in the future is Christ on his throne as high priest and king. All right? So he's going to use all those shadows, those types, those representations in the Old Testament, letting us know they're just shadows. If you go back to those things, what do you have?
Incomplete.
You're not going to have salvation.
Fallen from grace.
You've fallen from grace. Now that's how Paul says it over in Galatians, right? You have fallen from grace. Here he's using those shadows to say, look what you're doing to yourself. You're going back to the shadows. Even a child knows better. If I gave you the option of a shadow and a real thing, the true thing, what would a child take?
The real thing.
The real thing. Here's a shadow of an ice cream, and here's an ice cream. What do you want, little Johnny? Give me the ice cream. Well, it's just good common sense. And it looks that way to us, but he's doing that all through the book of Hebrews. And it's important for us to realize that because they're faced with that choice. Okay? Melchizedek then is a shadow. That's all he is. All he's intended to be, a type, a shadow. Jesus, our high priest, is higher and greater. He is the substance. So let's go back to Hebrews 7, with all that in mind, verse 3. Notice what it says, without father, without mother, without genealogy, that's how we meet him. We don't know where he came from, don't know who his father is, who his mother is. Having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like the Son of God, remains a priest continually. And then look down at verse 15. And it is yet far more evident if in the likeness of Melchizedek there arises another priest. So there's likeness here. All right? Just like you would have a shadow and the body. There's likeness. But that's as far as it goes. It's not saying that Jesus is Melchizedek or Melchizedek is Jesus. Any more than Joseph is Jesus. You've heard those sermons, I'm sure. Right? Or Moses. And even Moses is used as a shadow. Is Jesus a great lawgiver?
Yes.
Yes. I mean, think about it. Acts 3, it's used that way. So, which is more substantial, the shadow or the substance?
Substance.
I want the substance. That's what's substantial. That's what his argument is all about in chapter 7. Okay? And so, who is the substance or body that Melchizedek foreshadows? We've answered already, Christ. Okay? How was Melchizedek a shadow, a preview, a type of the Messiah?
Priest and king.
He was a priest and he was a king.
And he was ordained by God.
He was ordained by God. All those things. Yeah, you can start to build that. But I think sometimes we want to camp there and we want to try and answer things that really aren't. It's like wanting to know exactly what the tabernacle looked like. What did the Hebrew writer say about those things? Things which we can't even look into. Well, did God not lay it all out? Yeah, they had it all laid out for them. It was for them. So you're not going to see Melchizedek, based on what information we have in the Bible, exactly as Abraham did. And you can't ask him any questions. And it's not designed that way. It's not intended to be that way. It's intended to be a shadow. And pointing to the good things to come, the substance. So how is Christ our high priest in the likeness of Melchizedek? Keep talking. You said it. He's a priest and a king. That, if you got that out of it, you're done. That's great. On the first pass through the book of Hebrews, if you got that, boy, you're miles ahead of those brethren that have forgotten that Jesus is both priest and king upon his throne where? In heaven. At the right hand of God. So that all is going to be mentioned again. So one more time there, look at Hebrews 7:3. Without father, without mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like the Son of God, remains a priest continually. Melchizedek's priesthood was neither received from his parentage or passed on to his descendants. We don't know anything about it, where it came from and where it went to. We don't know anything about him. Tell me where he was born. I know he was king of Salem. Does that mean he was born there? I don't know. It's subjection on your part to say so. I can't say he was born there. He might have been born someplace else.
But it's not of importance.
That's exactly right. Exactly right.
All of this stuff had to be done and bring all of the Jews forward to the time of Christ.
Amen.
So everything that we study, look at it, remember it, and move on through the old law, which is our schoolmaster, for us to get to the New Testament, and that's what we live by.
Yeah, even the law itself is referred to as a shadow in that sense by the Hebrew writer. In that sense.
We think backwards sometimes. I think we make the application. We look at the system that God set up through the Levites to be priests. that was way after Abraham in this
Yes.
instance here. And then we see how that was done. We go back to Melchizedek and we try to make that apply to him. There's no comparison. He didn't,
No.
like you said, he didn't have a genealogy that allowed him to be a priest or so on. He was just appointed that way by God.
Right. And that in and of itself is a shadow because he is unique and that special. The Hebrew writer is going to say, consider how great this man was in that he blessed Abraham. Abram at the time. Well, he must have been a great man. But now, the shadow, what that tells me is consider how great Christ is in comparison to anything in the Old Testament. Anything. You see? And why would you want to go back to any of that? Now, it's not to say the Old Testament is not important. That's not at all the lesson here. But we get confused sometimes, I think. It is a shadow. He is one of a kind and unique. Melchizedek is. Melchizedek was without beginning or end of days, like the Son of God. That's how we see him. That's the sense. Melchizedek was a copy, a shadow, a representation of the true. And if you got that out of Melchizedek, you got the lesson. That's what we're supposed to get from it. If there's more to it, I'm not quite sure what it is. So, a type, symbol appointed by God to foreshadow something higher and greater, substance, literally body, the future Christ on his throne as high priest and king. So, here we're meeting Melchizedek back in Genesis 14. Abraham is blessed by him. That's what this artist is trying to convey there. And then we have Christ as our high priest and king upon his throne at the right hand of God. So you think about the things we can draw from this. The name Melchizedek, my king is righteous. Our king is righteous. Right? Position, he is a king and priest. You already noted that. His work, ministering to Abraham. When you think about ministering, that aspect of what the Lord did in serving, giving himself. And then genealogy is endless. Right? He's deity after all. Yeah.
In the Old Testament, when they had the tabernacle, the high priest once a year went in, and God came down to be on the
Meet him between them.
in the mercy seat.
Right.
And so we have a high priest. God didn't have to come down to him. Our high priest went up to him, to the true, to the heavens,
Right.
and is sitting by him.
Yeah. And all that was a shadow then. He'll deal with that in the 10th chapter. And you can kind of understand why he delivers it the way that he does. Because it's kind of just like we just delivered this. You got the point, and that's what was intended. So once the point is made, do you need 4 pages of detail?
No.
No, the point was made. I think we want 4 pages of detail when it comes to characters like Melchizedek, because we're curious, and that's understandable. But if you got this, you got it. All right? So, Zechariah 6 verse 13, even he shall build the temple of the Lord. This is a prophetic statement by Zechariah about the Messiah. So, this is part of that shadow of the Old Testament, right? And it's going to tell us something about the Messiah. And he shall bear the glory, shall sit and rule upon his throne, and he shall be a priest upon his throne, and the council of peace shall be between them both. Wow. If I'm a Jew and I hear that for the first time, my thoughts go to Melchizedek. The only one I know. When a king tried to do the work of a priest, what happened?
Oh, he was dethroned.
Well, God was not pleased, was he? How about if a priest, I can't remember an instance where a priest tried to do the work of a king. Maybe there were princes when you think about God's leadership and, some of that in wilderness wanderings, but do you think God would be pleased with that? No, they both had different roles. They had different roles, and so we're going to have a priest upon a throne. That's Hebrews 4 and verse 14, where this all began. Seeing then that we have a great high priest that is passed into the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold fast our profession. We have such a priest. Don't go back to all that other physical stuff, the shadows.
Yeah, I guess you could say, like, the main point of the book of Hebrews is the negation of Judaism.
Yeah.
So, one thing we've not mentioned, Melchizedek was under patriarchy.
Yes, he was a
Right,
patriarch.
so it's not a stretch, we understand that the head of the household would serve in the priestly role. So that kind of brings forward the New Testament priesthood idea. But your point's well taken, and Tim's, that you don't make more points out of it than the Bible makes.
Right.
Right, so,
We have to be careful with that. Not, you know, as a preacher, you know how that is. It's easy to do, get caught up in those things, and a lot of folks do. So, is Jesus a priest upon his throne?
Yes.
Now?
Yes,
Yes. Was it prophesied that he would be?
yes,
Yes. So, do you think there might be a shadow?
yes.
So, where's our great high priest today?
In heaven.
In heaven.
He's ruling.
He's ruling and reigning in heaven itself. So that brings us to Hebrews 7, verses 4 through 10. So let's continue. Now consider how great this man, talking about Melchizedek, consider how great this man was, to whom even the patriarch Abraham gave a tenth of the spoils. So who's paying who is important here. Who's giving the tithe, you want to use that term, that tenth portion of the spoils, to whom? Well, the lesser always gives to the greater. And indeed, those who are of the sons of Levi who receive the priesthood have a commandment to receive tithes from the people according to the law, that is, from their brethren. So many years later, right? You step right out of that to another example that they would be very familiar with. That they did it, and the reason they did it because God said so. It was in the law. Okay? Though they have come from the loins of Abraham. Don't forget that. But he whose genealogy is not derived from them, that's again Melchizedek, received tithes from Abraham and blessed him who had the promises. Now beyond all contradiction, the lesser is blessed by the better. So if Melchizedek blesses Abraham, who is better?
Melchizedek.
Melchizedek. He's greater. He's better. That's the sense. Now, beyond all contradiction, verse 7 again, the lesser is blessed by the better. Here mortal men receive tithes, but there he receives them, of whom it is witnessed that he lives. Even Levi, who receives tithes, paid tithes through Abraham, so to speak. For he was still in the loins of his father when Melchizedek met him. We'll stop right there. That's a lot. But to a Jew, it's like, oh, I guess he was. And now you're telling me that Jesus is my priest and king now. I'm a Christian. You could see the power of that. Why would anyone want to go back to that system? You see? Oh, let me get that in there.
It was comfortable.
Oh yeah, it was comfortable. There's a lot of pressure on them to do various things. There's a lot going on. Absolutely. They grew up with it. So Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, all of them impacted by this. We come down a little bit further. From Jacob, we get Levi. So where are the descendants of Levi, including Aaron and Moses, in the time of Melchizedek and Abram, back there in Genesis 14? In the loins of Abram. That's an interesting way to put it, isn't it? But there they are.
They were his posterity.
They're his posterity. They're not even born yet. They're way out there in the bloodline. But the Hebrew writer wants you to know, in this sense, they too paid tithes to one who was greater, Melchizedek. And who's greater than Melchizedek? None of the Levites. Christ is. So that Levitical priesthood, we just said, is lesser than Melchizedek, and Melchizedek is lesser than Jesus. Why would you want to leave Jesus? You see the power of that, the weight of that? He's not having to say it. If they're getting this, they're concluding it. They'd be reading that all along, right? So, where's the written law, by the way?
Done what?
It's forward. By the time in Genesis 14, where's the written law of Moses?
It hadn't happened.
It hadn't happened yet. We don't have Mount Sinai yet. That's not happened yet. That's all the way down the road, right? So to speak, way down, years of time. Okay? How many years will the children of Jacob spend in Egypt alone? 430. Did they have the law of Moses? No. Now, I'm not saying they were without law, don't misunderstand that. They had that patriarchal system that was mentioned, God through the fathers of the household. They had responsibilities concerning that. But we have the written law of Moses beginning there with Moses, right? That's why it's called the Mosaic Law. But we find out these children of Jacob spend in Egypt 430 years, and those numbers are given there in Exodus 12. But way back there with Melchizedek and Abram, none of that has taken place yet. Those arguments are made in the book of Hebrews. Now, as a Jew who grew up with that system, you would know that. So we would just have to state it one time, and it wouldn't be a Bible study. For us, it becomes a Bible study. I mean, I get that. I didn't, until I studied it, did you know it? Just did you know it growing up? Unless, mom and dad, somebody taught you. We didn't grow up in Judaism. So that's the first thing we can learn from all this. There's lessons there. But going a little bit further, you get Judah, according to the law of Moses, how many priests were of the tribe of Judah?
None.
You see, go back here, you got Jacob, there's Levi, here's Judah next to him, and that yellow, I don't mean for that to overlap like he's got any priestly responsibilities at all. He doesn't. It comes from Levi, right?
What kind? You're confusing me.
The priesthood comes from
okay,
Levi.
yeah.
Levitical priesthood.
Yeah.
That's why it's called Levitical priesthood. Judah has nothing to do with that, right? And so
Neither does the law of Moses.
neither does the law of Moses. So, yeah, I'm sorry, Tim.
The new law does, ushers that in.
The new law ushers that in. How many priests, authorized priests, let me put it that way, authorized by God in His Word, came from the tribe of Judah in the Old Testament?
Oh, none in the Old Testament.
None. Therefore, they were all a shadow, not the substance, not the body. God in His wisdom laid it out that way, so there could be no mistaking. Can you imagine how confusing it would have been if we just had, from any tribe? Is it Rehoboam, Jeroboam? Jeroboam? I always get north and south mixed up.
Don't let the Jays get together.
Yeah, that's good. Don't let the Jays get together, so it's Rehoboam. Thank you. No, it's Jeroboam. Of what tribe is Jesus?
Judah.
Judah. So that's New Testament. He's of the tribe of Judah. So here again, verses 4 through 10, as you're reading through that, we're not going to read it again. How is it argued that Melchizedek is greater than Abraham and Levi?
Because they tithed to him.
They tithed to him. And Abraham was blessed by Melchizedek. Therefore Levi was blessed by Melchizedek. And all his descendants were blessed.
You have to understand where true blessings come from. They come from God.
Come from God.
Melchizedek was authorized to issue blessings to Abraham, not the other way
Right.
around. He tithed to him, but he didn't bless him.
Yeah. So who did the blessing? Melchizedek. Verse 7, right? So who is the lesser?
Abraham.
Abraham is the lesser. If you need to make you a note on the side of your Bible, that means that Melchizedek is better. He's greater. Those are good words. Nothing wrong with those words. That's what the Hebrew writer is driving home. Then Abraham. The reason is, first of all, his inherent nature. He's referred to as righteous. Tell me the sins of Melchizedek. Now, I know he's a man with feet of clay. I understand. I'm not saying he was sinless. But as a shadow and a type, he is righteous. You see that? That's first thing. So where is the Aaronic priesthood, the descendants of Aaron, right? Aaronic priesthood when Abraham pays tithes to Melchizedek?
Still in Abraham.
In his law. Very good. Why did the Israelites pay tithes and the priests collect the tithes? Look at verse 5.
Because they lived, that's their living. They paid tithes, and that's how the priests lived.
That's right. Who set that up, though? God did. Yeah, in verse 5, look, indeed, those who are of sons of Levi, who are of the sons of Levi, who receive the priesthood, have a commandment to receive tithes. This is how you're going to survive. Like you said, this is how you're going to survive. This is how you're going to live. Part of that is going to be, in part, your tithes. Okay? And people are commanded to tithe. Okay? So they get that from the people according to the law. That is from their brethren, though they have come from the loins of Abraham. That's coming from, the point he's making is that all come from the law. The people aren't doing it because there's something righteous about those Levites. Now I understand they're serving in the office of priest and high priest. Does that mean you don't have any problems?
No.
No. And what do you know about them? Well, there's enough recorded. We know there were lots of problems, right, with those folks. So that's why this is within the law. So if you just think about it from the standpoint of law. So we'll get this in. This is what he's doing. Two types of priesthood are laid out. And it's really asking the question for those brethren, the book of Hebrews, and there's a lesson for us as well, which do you prefer? Abraham, Aaron, and the priesthood, which was temporary, it was earthy, it was sinful, and it was under law. Isn't that true?
Yeah, simple.
It seems that way. Yeah.
Now it does.
Right. To us it is. Because we didn't grow up with all those pressures of the law and all with the law and, losing family members who are still in the law and still practicing Judaism and all those things. We had different pressures, but certainly there's something going on there. As opposed to this priesthood that is a shadow, a type of the Messiah, type of the King, right? A shadow of that. Eternal, symbolically. Again, no beginning, no end. Symbolically, it's like he's eternal, isn't it? He's heavenly, right? He's serving God. He's righteous, and he's not under the law. Why isn't he under the law of Moses?
Moses hadn't gotten it
The
yet.
law of Moses isn't there yet. So by law here, that's what I'm referring to.
That should be the law.
The law, yes.
Instead of the law. He was under the law. of some sort.
Sure, some sort. Man has always been under law of some sort. Yeah. So I just thought that helped me when I laid it out. I was hoping it might help you. The reasoning then, Melchizedek, king and priest, is greater than Abraham. Abraham is greater than Aaron. Jesus' priesthood then is greater than all of those by far. By far. Because he didn't deal with the copies of the things in the heavens. What did he deal with?
The truth.
The truth. He took his true blood as a true king and a true priest before the one true God in heaven itself and established something that no man could ever establish. See that?
It says he humbled himself to the point of the cross.
Right, Philippians 2, yeah.
He did everything that God wanted him to do to put him in that perfect position, as long as God lets the world stand. He is our priest and our king.
Yeah. He is a priest and king upon his throne forevermore. Yeah. So that brings us to Hebrews 7, verse 11, beginning, going to verse 19. So let's at least read it. Any thoughts through verse 10? Okay. Therefore, so what's the therefore? Because, yeah, you got to kind of read it all together, but we're not doing that. Therefore, if perfection were through the Levitical priesthood, for under it the people received the law, what further need was there that another priest should rise according to the order of Melchizedek and not be called according to the order of Aaron? See how that makes perfect sense with everything we've... For the priesthood being changed of necessity, there is also a change of the law. For he of whom these things are spoken belongs to another tribe, from which no man has officiated at the altar in the Old Testament under the Old Testament law. For it is evident that our Lord arose from Judah, of which tribe Moses spoke nothing concerning priesthood. I've got to get all the way down to 19. And it is yet far more evident if in the likeness of Melchizedek there arises another priest, who has come not according to the law of a fleshly commandment, but according to the power of an endless life. Underline in your mind, endless life. That's going to become the theme from here to the end of the book of Hebrews. Jesus is upon his throne because of his power and because of an eternal life. What kept him in the grave? Nothing. Nothing.
Prophecy.
Yeah, prophecy, I guess. But literally there, he's not still in the grave. I mean, he's, after 3 days, as he said, he'll rise, and he did.
But that was, and also, 3 days, that changed the worship to the first day of the week, rather than the Sabbath for the Jews. When he
Yeah.
rose on the first day of the week.
He rose on the first day of the week, yeah, a
And
lot of
that
other
changed-
things. But
Right, that changed the day of the old law. The day, the Sabbath day, didn't matter, and it wasn't gonna matter anymore.
it still mattered. We have a Sabbath, there is a Sabbath to come. But it's not that Old Testament shadow.
Well, let's say this, it's not Saturday now,
Right.
it's Sunday.
Right. But Saturday, Sunday is not a Sabbath and not related to it.
No. But
It's a day of worship because Christ rose from the dead on the first day of the week. The Sabbath, Saturday, is a shadow of another rest
Right.
that is coming. The Hebrew writer talks about that as well. Our rest is in heaven. Yeah. Okay. Very good. Very good. We'll pick up there, and that gets us verse 11 through 19. If you haven't studied it, then go ahead and study verses 11 through 19, review that, and that'll help you with chapter 8 when you get into it.